Good morning.
Good morning.
There are so many emotions and thoughts that are going through my mind right now. I'm trying to center and focus on the message today. But I want to thank Dodie for the symbolism as far as the people and the refugees and the people fighting in Ukraine for their homeland. I'm wearing the blue and the sunflower, which is the flower of Ukraine. And the collection, I can see all of the things that are in the back there that people have, through the goodness of their hearts, shared with the people of Ukraine. So thank you. Thank you very much. I have an anecdote that goes with the prodigal son. I went to Ukraine, returned to Ukraine. I don't know if I was a prodigal son or not, but I felt like I was coming home. And the greeting was not warm at first. And so I thought about the older son in the prodigal son parable. And people were suspicious of Americans coming after the Orange Revolution, after Ukraine had become a democratic country. And they were suspicious because Americans were coming over there with literally suitcases full of money to buy land back from areas where their ancestors had lived before. And so the people of Ukraine were really very suspicious about why were you there and why were you coming. And again, you could almost hear the resonance with the story that we're going to be hearing today, that the son who stayed, not left and is now coming back, had worked hard, and now people were coming to take away the fruits of their labor. So it really resonated with me, and to be able to share with them that that was not the point of my coming there, but to celebrate having been a second generation in the United States from Ukraine, that we wanted to celebrate that fact and not to come and to take anything away from it. So in Luke is a really good, clear storyteller. I love his rhymes and rhythm. Chapter 15, 1 through 3, and verses 11 through 32. The tax collectors and the sinners were all gathering around to hear him, at which the Pharisees and the scribes murmured, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them?" Then he addressed this parable to them. Jesus said to them, "A man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the estate that is coming to me.' So the father divided up the property. Some days later, this younger son collected all his belongings and went off to a distant land, where he squandered his money on dissolute living. After he had spent everything, a great famine broke out in that country, and he was in dire need. So he attached himself to one of the property class of the place, who sent him to his farm to take care of pigs. He longed to fill his belly with the husks that were fodder for the pigs, but no one made a move to give him anything. Coming to his senses at last, he said, 'How many hired hands at my father's place have more than enough to eat, while here I am starving? I will break away and return to my father, and say to him, Father, I have sinned against God and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Treat me like one of the hired hands.' And with that he set off for his father's house. And while he was still a distance away, his father caught sight of him and was deeply moved. He ran out to meet him, threw his arms around his neck and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against God and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son.' And the father said to the servants, 'Quick, bring out the finest robes and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and shoes on his feet. Take the fatted calf and kill it. Let us eat and celebrate, because this son of mine was dead and now has come back to life. He was lost and now is found." Then the celebration began. Meanwhile, the elder son was out in the land, and as he neared the house on his way home, he heard the sound of music and dancing, and he called one of the servants and asked him the reason for the dancing and music. And the servant answered, "Your brother is home, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has him back in good health." The son grew angry at this and would not go in. But his father came out and began to plead with him. He said to the father in reply, "For years now I have slaved for you. I have never disobeyed one of your orders, yet you never gave me so much as a kid goat to celebrate with my friends. Then, when the son of yours returns, after having gone through your property with loose women, you killed the fatted calf for him." "My son," replied the father, "you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we have to celebrate and rejoice. This brother of yours was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now is found." So ends the reading.
Thank you so much, Al, for sharing those words with us and sharing your story and antidote about going back to Ukraine, and made it very powerful. I appreciate that so much. Please join me in a moment of prayer. God, we gather here to feel your sense of love embracing us. We also gather to hear your word. Help us to open our hearts, our minds, our entire beings, that we might be touched by your word, inspired by your presence, enlightened, that we may take what we glean from this gathering and share it as we go through our lives, being your people in our community, in our homes, our places of work, and throughout the world. Amen. Well, as soon as Al started reading, you must have known what the scripture was all about. The prodigal son, most of us anyway, who have been in church throughout our lives at different points, know that story. The prodigal son, or the lost son as it's sometimes called. The Gospel of Luke is the only one that shares this story. And Jesus uses it to lift up this radical love of God that is always wanting to embrace us, that allows nothing to stand in the way of creating this relationship, God and God's people. And it comes on the heels of the Pharisees, the scribes, the leaders, the religious leaders of the day, challenging Jesus, because where was he found? He was found sitting with the sinners and sharing food with them and conversation with them and sitting beside them in a way that would have been deemed unclean and unacceptable in that time. Jesus tells this story to hopefully enlighten them that God's love is bigger than that. So for us, as those of us who hear this story and have known this story from the past, like myself, I try to come at it with a fresh new perspective and to hear it with new ears and new eyes, to read it with new eyes, that we might find something in it as we open our minds that informs us for today and the moment we are living in this moment of uncertainty on so many levels, personally and throughout the world. And so I hope we can all open ourselves up to see this story in a new sense, with a new sense of understanding. There are three characters in this story. They're the father and the two sons. and no power. Now we have it. Okay, did I say something wrong? All right, let's see how this goes. The father and the two sons, the one who remains there, the elder son, who we know stuck it out with his father day in and day out, working alongside his dad, doing whatever he was expected to do. And then this younger son who actually gets his father to give him the inheritance before he should normally have received it, and goes out then and proceeds to venture off on his own and spend it. And spend it so unwisely that he ends up being destitute. And in that destitution, that time of destitution, he sort of a light bulb goes on and realizes that if I even go back home, I'll do better than I am where I am now. So he turns back home. Of course, in the story, we tend to, I'm sure all of you do this, we try to figure out which one we are. And I bet you a lot of us line up with the elder brother. But I bet also there's a part of our lives that perhaps maybe we've been that younger son too. Sort of going out and wandering through life and maybe doing some things that we look back and don't feel that great about, but we returned home, right? We returned home. So maybe there's pieces of both of these brothers in our own being that cause us to resonate with them. But the reality is the story is not about the brothers, really. Though there is a fair amount of what we were told about the younger brother's escapades and the elder's anger, rather the story really is about the father's capacity to love both of them. You know, I remember going to my mother one time. I was the fourth of our family, of 4 daughters. And I remember one time clearly asking her which one of us did she love better. And in her wisdom, and I believe her, that she meant it sincerely, I love all of you. I don't love any of you more than the other, but I love you all. Now we have a window in this story into the younger son's mind as he contemplates what he wants to say to his father when he returns. Expecting, totally expecting, and understandably, his father's wrath and judgment, right? To be treated as a servant in his father's house was all that he could hope for. Now, what he didn't know, though, was from the moment he left his father's home, the father never stopped looking for him. Now, it doesn't say that. But how would the father have seen him way off on the horizon if he wasn't forever looking and scanning the horizon for what might look like his son heading his way? Of course, he watched day in and day out with a sense of yearning and desire. And when that day came, what did he do? The father dropped everything. Whatever he was doing didn't matter. And he raced across the field. And when he got to his son, he threw his arms around him and he kissed him. And I can only imagine that son must have been like so moved with this incredible love that embraced him. And then in the midst of the son's groveling in apologies and begging for forgiveness, saying, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. The father, as though he didn't even hear it. Did you notice that? He didn't say, don't worry about it, son. That's okay. He didn't pay any attention to it. He said, let's have a party. Let's celebrate. Let's celebrate. And he called for the best of the best robes, the shoes for his feet, the ring, the calf that they've been raising for a special occasion. Well, here is that occasion, and he invites everyone. He said, this, my son, was dead and is come alive. He was lost, and now he's found. There was no questioning from the father about where he'd been. We don't even ever have a sense of that in the story, that the father later on said, okay, tell me about what you were doing and what do you have left. He didn't say anything. The only thing of importance was that he had turned around toward home, seeking a renewed relationship with his father. The word prodigal is defined as wasteful, extravagant, imprudent, all of which fit the younger son's irresponsible behavior, right? We wouldn't question that. But it is further defined as unsparing, lavish, and bountiful, all of which characterize the extraordinary love of the Father. And that is the message Jesus wants those who are listening to hear and to understand. One commentary referred to God as the prodigal God, in that the extent of love seems above and beyond anything that would reasonably be given, even undeserving, and yet such love is lavishly, unsparingly, extravagantly, bountifully poured out upon the Son and upon us. That is the message that offers us hope at a time in our history when we need to know hope more than ever. There seems to be an unraveling taking place, an unraveling of values, an unraveling of priorities, of beliefs, of responsibility, of what really matters. The gift of earth, the natural world of which we are a part, the significance of finding common ground upon which we can gather together, the importance of community one with another, these that have been given as gifts to us, an inheritance of great proportion, are being misused and abused every day and are seemingly undervalued by so many. You know, as I was leaving the house, my phone kind of has a little ding that tells me a new news headline came on, and I looked at it because I like to kind of be prepared for anything that might be newly happening that I ought to know about as I come to worship here this morning. And here's the headline from the New York Times. It says, Russia's invasion of Ukraine could mark the start of a more violent era. There are some words of encouragement, huh? And Sue Griffin's writing, To Love the Marigold in The Impossible Will Take a Little Longer, writes, among those who seek or want social change, despair is endemic now. A lack of hope that is tied to many kinds of powerlessness. Repeating patterns of suffering, burgeoning philosophies of fear and hatred, not to speak of the failure of dreams. Where once there were societies that served as models for a better future, grand plans, utopias, now there is distrust and dissatisfaction, a sense of powerlessness edging into nihilism. It sounds pretty depressing, all of that. Deeply discouraging. Cause for despair. But where there is faith, there is always hope. Where there is imagination, there is always possibility. In the face of all that lies before us of despair, worry, uncertainty, fear, it is the turning around to that which has given us life, the powerful presence of spirit, of dreams, of our imagination, that things can be different. These are what matter. And it is in that turning from and turning to that makes all the difference. A woman I heard at a conference some time back spoke of a regular morning ritual that she does as she walks toward the sunrise every morning. Now, as you know, being one that goes out in the morning, and I take many pictures, and if not on my camera, certainly in my mind's eye, I resonated with that. The sunrise gives us opportunity to welcome in a new day, embrace a new day filled with possibilities. Living into our dreams and our imagination of what the day can become. What a way to start our morning, filled with hope. Turning to the light that is the cause for celebration, just as when the younger son in this parable that Jesus tells turns toward home. In the turning, the son is no longer lost in despair and hopelessness, dead to the possibilities of life, but is found with renewed hope and has come alive with the imagination that all can be restored. That is worth celebrating. The turning to hope, the awakening of our souls, the rebirth of our spirits that believe all things are possible. It is in celebrating together, in the discovery of common ground that brings harmony and wholeness to all of life. The Father's example of extraordinary love is meant to be a model for the elder son in accepting his brother as he is and rejoicing alongside his father instead of finding fault and holding back his love from his brother. And so it is for all of us as we open up the physical doors of our church, if you will, and the doorways of our hearts. As we open wide without judgment and welcome in. Inviting in without having to pass a test to enter in. Considering the lavish love that God pours out onto our lives, the unsparing love, the bountiful love, the extravagant love, might we strive to do the same for one another. Any form of Christianity that points a finger at another, that judges and has become a gatekeeper or shuts the doors on others is not the Christianity that Jesus was talking about. With the turning back of the younger son, the returning home, to walk alongside his father, the takeaway from this story for those who align themselves with the elder son, and every one of us who seek to live in relationship with God, the principles of our faith is this. Love is not if or because. Love is anyway, and even though, and in spite of. In that, there is unbounded hope and cause for great celebration today and always.